Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are tackling a massive piece of literary heritage.
We really are.
We're looking at the Kathasaritsagara, or the Ocean of Streams of Story. It's this monumental collection of Indian folktales, of legends.
Yeah.
But we aren't trying to summarize the whole book. I mean, that would take years.
It would. And ocean is the right word for it. It's just vast.
Mm.
But today, our mission is to look at the origin story of the text itself.
Right.
We're doing a deep dive into episode 15, which tells the legend of the author, Guṇāḍhya, and the tragedy of the burning of the great tale.
And just reading through the source material, this is not your typical author writes a book story.
Not at all.
This is a narrative about, a rejected manuscript, a wounded scholar, and a fire that nearly erased what might have been one of the greatest collections of stories ever told.
It's a story that deals with the fragility of art in a very, very visceral way. You have this image of a fire in the forest and a masterpiece being fed to it, page by page.
It's haunting.
It is. And
Yeah.
it raises some really difficult questions about pride, about language, and, who gets to decide what is valuable culture and what is just crude.
So let's get into that.
Mm.
To understand why this fire even happened, we have to look at Guṇāḍhya himself. The text places him in the court of King Somadeva,
Mm.
and he's not some, struggling artist. He's a heavy hitter.
Absolutely.
Mm.
The sources describe him as a minister, a scholar of the absolute highest order. And you have to remember, the Satavahana court was a center of refinement.
Right.
So to be a scholar there, you were a master of Sanskrit, the Vedas, all the intricate rules of courtly life. He had status. His reputation was, for all intents and purposes, bulletproof.
Until the debate.
Until the debate.
I was reading through this account of the vow he makes, and it just feels like a moment of pure, unfiltered ego.
It is. It's classic intellectual hubris.
He gets into an argument about language and refinement. It's basically a who is smarter contest, and he
Yeah.
just snaps.
He does. His expertise is challenged. And in this fit of anger, he makes a vow that completely backs him into a corner. He swears that if he loses this debate, he will renounce Sanskrit, Prakrit, all the refined tongues of the land.
Which is just, it's insane, isn't it? For a scholar in ancient India, swearing off Sanskrit is like a modern surgeon swearing off using their hands.
Exactly. He is effectively silencing himself in the only world he knows.
And he loses the debate.
He loses. And so, true to his word, but, completely driven by this wounded pride, he withdraws. He can no longer speak the language of the court, so he can't exist in the court.
So he leaves. He just retreats into the Vindhya forest.
And this is where the whole feeling of the story shifts. It goes from this rigid, high-stakes court drama into something far more mystical.
Right, because the source says he encounters divine beings in the forest.
Yes, and they narrate a story to him.
Hmm.
But this isn't just some short fable. This is the Bharat-katha, the great tale.
An epic.
A universe of stories. It's described as this massive, sprawling narrative with kings, demigods, sorcerers, love, betrayal, destiny, everything.
But here's the catch, and this is the part I found so fascinating. He has this divine inspiration. He has to write it down. But he's sworn off the good languages. He can't use Sanskrit, so the sources say he writes it in Paishiki.
And this detail is absolutely crucial. Paishichi literally translates to something like the language of the ghouls or demons.
Wow.
In the hierarchy of languages at the time, you had Sanskrit at the very top, the language of the gods, the elites, then the Prakrits, the common tongues. Paishish was at the very bottom. It was considered harsh, crude, utterly unsophisticated.
So he's writing the most magnificent story ever told, a story from the gods, but he's writing it in what they considered the linguistic equivalent of a grunt.
That's a good way to put it. And he doesn't just write a little bit. The legend says he writes 7 massive volumes. Some versions even say he used his own blood for ink.
He spends years in the forest just transcribing this masterpiece in this forbidden language.
Exactly. And eventually, he decides it's time to return. He has his magnum opus. And he believes, that the story's so powerful that the language won't matter.
He sends it to King Satavahana.
And here's the tragedy. He assumes substance will win out over form.
But it doesn't.
No. When the king sees the manuscript, he doesn't read the story. He just sees the language. He sees Paisheki.
The source is pretty blunt about the rejection. The king just dismisses it as crude.
It's a purely snobbish rejection. He basically asks, Why would I dirty my hands with a text written in the language of ghouls?
So he rejects the greatest story ever written without reading a word, all because of the packaging.
Precisely.
And that has to be the breaking point for Guṇāḍhya. I mean, he lost his position over pride, spent years in isolation on this work.
And now the very person he wanted to impress has, in his mind, thrown it in the trash. It breaks him.
Which leads us to that central image. He goes back to the forest, builds a sacred fire, and decides that if the world is too refined for his work, then the world doesn't deserve it.
The description is, it's haunting, as you said. He sits on a rock, reads a page aloud, and then throws it into the fire.
Leaf by leaf.
A ritualistic destruction. But something happens as he reads. And this is where the source material draws this sharp, sharp line between what we'd call culture and nature.
The animals.
The animals, right. The text says the deer, the boars, the birds, they all stop what they're doing.
They just gather around him.
They gather. And they're so captivated by the story, by the emotion, that they stop eating. They just stand there, motionless, tears streaming from their eyes, just listening.
I love that contrast. You have the king, the human expert, who couldn't get past the grammar.
Right.
And then you have the deer, who don't know a thing about Sanskrit, but they get it. They recognize the beauty immediately.
It's a powerful critique of over-sophistication, isn't it? The animals responded to the essence, the feeling of the story. The court was obsessed with the container. The forest drank the water.
And this goes on for so long that the king actually finds out.
He does. The legend says the meat served at the palace became lean and dry because the animals in the forest were starving themselves to listen to Guṇāḍhya's tale.
So the king investigates.
He goes to the forest and he sees this scene. Guṇāḍhya, emaciated, surrounded by this silent circle of weeping animals, throwing his life's work into a fire.
And he realizes his mistake.
Oh, he realizes the magnitude of it. He sees the power of the work. He begs Guṇāḍhya to stop.
But he's been at this for a while.
For days, maybe weeks. By the time the king gets there, 6 of the 7 volumes are already ash.
Gone.
Gone forever. Guṇāḍhya just hands over the 7th volume, the only one that survived.
And that surviving fragment, that's what became the Kathasaritsagara.
That's it. The ocean of streams of story. And it's a massive text in its own right. It's twice the length of the Iliad and the Odyssey combined.
And that's just a fraction of the original.
Just 1/7. The scrap that was saved from the fire.
That's mind-blowing. If the ocean is just a piece, imagine what the full Bhagat must have been.
We can only imagine. And that is the permanent scar this story leaves on literary history.
Let's circle back to Guṇāḍhya for a minute. We talked about the king's mistake, but Guṇāḍhya played a role in this destruction too. His ego seems to be the engine for this whole disaster.
It's the driving force, really. Think about it. His ego caused the initial vow. I'm too smart to lose this debate. That isolated him. But then, look at the burning. That's also an act of ego.
How do you mean?
He was destroying his own work despite the rejection. It was a reaction to not being validated. If you won't appreciate me, I'll ensure you never get the chance. It's a tragic kind of possessiveness over his own creation.
He'd rather destroy it than let it exist in a world that didn't honor it on his terms.
Exactly. But here's the paradox you pointed out in the outline. If he hadn't had that massive ego and made that vow,
he never would have gone to the forest. He never would have learned Paishapi or heard the great tale.
Precisely. The pride was the catalyst for the creation and the cause of its destruction. It's just a tangled web.
Let's dig a bit deeper into that language versus substance theme. The king's court is not so different from our world, is it?
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Think about modern academia or, highbrow literary circles. We often judge intelligence by dialect or jargon.
Right. If someone uses slang or has a certain accent or doesn't write in the approved academic style, we can sometimes just dismiss their ideas.
It's the same mistake. It's like dismissing a groundbreaking scientific theory because it was written on a napkin. The king couldn't hear the music because he was too busy critiquing the instrument.
And the irony is that the refined language, Sanskrit, was stagnant in this story. The living, breathing story came from the low language.
It reminds us that culture so often comes from the margins, not the center.
And the animals represent that pure reception. They're the ideal audience because they have no pretense.
They're the audience every artist dreams of, really. An audience that listens with its heart, not with a checklist.
I want to talk about the sheer loss here, the image of burning the manuscript. It's just so visceral.
It's the nightmare of every historian, every archivist. We assume great works survive because they're great. This story tells us the opposite. Greatness is fragile.
There's that line from the source material. What we burn in anger may have been our immortality.
That's the core of it. He was burning his own immortality. And in the ancient world, there were no backups, no cloud storage.
One copy.
One copy. When that palm leaf hit the fire, those verses were gone forever. It makes you look at the Kathasaritsagara so differently. It's not just a book, it's a survivor, a refugee from a much larger world.
It makes you wonder how many other great tales turned to ash without a king running in at the last minute to save one volume.
Exactly. Our entire literary canon might just be the lucky few who survived the fire.
That's a heavy thought.
It should be. It teaches us that preservation isn't a passive thing. It's an active choice. And the king was almost too late.
So as we process this, there are a few big questions the story forces us to ask ourselves.
For me, the first is about recognition. How often is greatness recognized only in hindsight, after it's almost lost? Guṇāḍhya is a legend now, but in his moment of greatest need, he was an outcast.
And for you, the listener, I'd ask, are you the king in this story? Is there an idea, a person, a piece of art that you're dismissing because it doesn't look or sound refined enough?
Are you letting the packaging distract you from the substance? That's the challenge. Can we learn to listen like the forest, rather than just judge like the court?
And then there's the question of anger, that impulse to just burn it all down when we feel rejected. Guṇāḍhya shows us the ultimate cost of that.
Yes. The cost is that you might actually succeed. You might erase the very thing that made you special.
We're not going to wrap this up with a Tawney moral. The story itself doesn't really have one. It's a messy, beautiful tragedy.
It ends with a partial save, but an immeasurable loss. We have the ocean, but we lost the universe that fed it.
I think we should just leave the listener with that final image from the source. The fire dying down, the stack of 7 books reduced to 1.
And the king standing there, finally realizing that the birds and the beasts understood something that he, with all his refinement, completely missed.
Sometimes the forest knows better than the palace.
It seems so.
Thanks for deep diving with us.
It's a pleasure.